I'll be honest. I didn't want to have to do this show, but I'm left with no choice. DK Metcalf demands a trade. Where could he potentially end up? On this edition of Seattle Seahawks Today, we will break down the top trade destinations for the Seahawks wide receiver of where he could end up if he is dealt. Before we do, we have a sub battle going on between now and the start of the draft between some powerhouse channels here at Chat Sports within the NFC. 49ers report, Chase Sr., scumbag, can't stand him. We want to beat him in this sub battle. Cowboys report, led by Tom Downey. I heard he's a loud snorer, and I would love to put him to sleep and win this sub battle this week. So let's do our part. We already got a head start. We're up, but let's run up the score a bit. For daily Seahawks news and rumors, live shows. We're live for the first 3 days of free agency, folks. You got to be subscribed. You ain't alive if you ain't subscribed. Sub it up. You'll be glad you did, and we'll get started with today's show. So where could DK Metcalf end up if he is traded? Well, let's kind of tell you how we got to this point, first and foremost. DK, he's had a good run with this Seattle Seahawks organization as he was picked in 2019 out of Ole Miss. And I got to tell you, I'm a big DK Metcalf fan. I love DK Metcalf. I don't want him to go anywhere. It's been a very good run for him in Seattle. 2 Pro Bowl appearances, the second-team All-Pro in 2020. Set the franchise record for receiving yards in 2020 with over 1,300 yards. He has been consistent over the years, folks. He's never been a superstar, but he's never been bad either. He's been dependable. You can see the statistics. This year, even when he got banged up a bit, he still ended up with nearly 1,000 yards. And whether it was Geno throwing him the ball or Russell Wilson, he has been extremely effective for this Seahawks team, and I would hate to see him go. With that said, if you trade him, you're likely not going to get a whole lot for him. That's part of the reason why I don't want to trade him, is that you are looking at best, maybe a second and a fifth-round pick to move on from DK Metcalf. If you would have traded him a couple of years ago, you could have gotten a first-round pick. I feel like the time has come and gone to trade DK Metcalf at this point just because you're not going to get the return you're looking for. I'd rather just pay him the money to stay around. And just because you've put in a trade request does not mean you're necessarily gone. This could be a negotiating tactic on Metcalf to get the deal he's looking for. I think the projection right now is about a 4-year, $110 million deal potentially for DK Metcalf. And if you're Seattle, you got about $45 million in cap space that you've opened up with the moves that you've made. You can afford to pay DK Metcalf. I'd rather pay him and keep him than to see him play elsewhere, personally speaking. Should the Seahawks trade DK Metcalf? It's our pinned comment today. You got 2 options here. You can type HY for hell yes, HN for hell no. Get in that comment section. Let us know if you should move on from DK or not. Let's go over the trade destinations. Let's start with the Green Bay Packers. There was a rumor last week from Corbin Smith pointing to the Green Bay Packers and a potential first-round pick and getting one of the Packers receivers. And obviously that did not ultimately work out. But nonetheless, it did cause quite a stir. And I'll say this. One of the silver linings with the Packers, if you were to make a trade with them, whether it's a guy like Romeo Doubs or another one of their young receivers, they have some assets that you can get in a trade. Not only could you potentially get draft capital, but you could get a replacement receiver since you would have to replace both Metcalf and Lockett. You could make life easier in that sense, whether it's a guy like Dobbs or somebody else. So that could be intriguing for Seattle. And not to mention, you have the relationship there with John Schneider and the Green Bay Packers organization where he previously worked. So a trade could certainly be possible with Green Bay. Next up, the Kansas City Chiefs. There was a report out within the last week or so that the Chiefs are very interested in DK Metcalf. And if you recall, the Chiefs a few years ago, they drafted a guy named McCole Hardman over DK Metcalf. And they still live to this day to regret that decision. And if you remember the report from ESPN's Adam Schefter, when he announced the trade request from DK, he said that DK wants to play for a contending team. I can't think of a more contending team than the Kansas City Chiefs, who are in the middle of a dynasty right now. They've won 3 Super Bowls, but they don't necessarily have the type of receiver that DK Metcalf is. Rashee Rice is very good. Xavier Worthy is coming into his own, and he had a good rookie campaign. DK Metcalf could bring something different that those receivers don't offer and make that Chiefs offense even more explosive. And if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you're thinking to yourselves, we were just one win away from getting a Super Bowl title. Could DK be that difference maker? Maybe the Chiefs are willing to overpay potentially for DK Metcalf because they know how close they are. Where will DK Metcalf play next season? Will it be Green Bay? Will it be Kansas City? Is he going to be back in Seattle or somewhere else? Get your predictions in now where you think DK Metcalf is ultimately going to end up. We got hats on sale now for up to 50% off. All supplies last at chatsports.com/Seahawks hats. Got the flat bill version, got the baseball cap style, all sorts of different hats for your liking, and it's all in one place. Chatsports.com/Seahawks hats. You can see these hats we have on your screen, and we have plenty of others to choose from as well, in addition to Seahawks merchandise of all sorts at chatsports.com/Seahawks hats. So what are you waiting for? Get yours today. Chatsports.com/Seahawks hats. The link is in the comments and description of today's video. Another team that has been linked to DK Metcalf is the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots, not a contending team like DK Metcalf is looking for, but he does not have a no-trade clause. So ultimately, the Hawks do not have to honor DK's request to go to a contending team. New England, they got plenty of cash, a lot of cap space to use. They have a young, emerging quarterback there in Drake Maye, who I think the world of. I think he's going to be a superstar in this league. And you give him a good receiver in DK Metcalf, that could be pretty interesting. And not to mention, you talk about draft capital. If you're Seattle here, of the teams we're talking about, New England's going to be picking the highest of anybody of those teams out there. Their draft picks are going to be better than other teams. New England could make sense for Seattle. Maybe not make sense for DK, but it could be a nice return for what Seattle could be looking for in a haul. Up next, they tell me nobody circles the wagon like the Buffalo Bills. Let's go to Buffalo now. Josh Allen coming off an MVP campaign was very good this year. You have some interesting weapons there with Shakir and Knox and Kincaid and others, but you don't necessarily have a go-to receiver. I don't think Shakir is that guy. DK could potentially be that guy, and that's a team, they need wide receiver help, and they feel, much like Kansas City, they're a player or two away. They potentially could be willing to overpay for DK Metcalf in his services, but they're not going to be picking high, unlike New England, so that could make things more difficult for a trade there if you were to send him to Buffalo. What are the chances DK Metcalf ends up returning to Seattle? What do you think? Can the Hawks ultimately get a contract extension done? Scale it for me in the comments section 1 through 10, how likely you think it is. I would say it's about a 4 out of 10 right now. It's not impossible, but still unlikely at this point. I'll go 4, about 40% would be the number I'd put on it. Give me your number in the comments section. Last on our list, trade destinations. The Las Vegas Raiders. And you look at the Las Vegas Raiders. Pete Carroll is there. They need a lot of help. And Pete already has brought in some of his former assistants. He and DK had a great relationship. There's been potential talk of Tyler Lockett going there as well. maybe Pete just gets the gang back together in Las Vegas and creates a union with Pete Carroll. I think that's certainly a possibility that he could end up there with the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Raiders then have the best receiver they've had since they moved on from Devontae Adams, and they get a receiver that's actually younger than Devontae Adams. So those are the teams I'm watching for. I think the Chargers are also another possibility as well. Plenty of teams that will have interest in DK Metcalf. Let's see where he ends up. For continuing Seahawks coverage, subscribe now to Seattle Seahawks Today for the latest happenings on your favorite team all off season long. Subscribe now, youtube.com/SeahawksTV. I'm Tyler Jones. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.